Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at the Classic Collection, or EX01 for short, and the Classic Collection adds lots of new and powerful cards to build some new and exciting decks with, or iterate on some current and existing decks. And one of the decks I'm going to be building / iterating on is going to be the Garurumon Tribal deck. So if you don't know exactly what tribal means, tribal is basically just a fancy word for synergy, and this is just a deck focused on Garurumon synergies. So we have lots of different cards to pull from for Garurumons to be using and utilizing because, well, Garurumon is one of the more expansive types of cards in the game because it just got lots and lots of support, so you could really build and customize it to do various different things depending on what you're trying to gain out of the deck. So right now, I'm just trying to focus on utilizing the Classic Collection cards to try to make the deck as strong as it possibly can, given all of its different parts and pieces. And oh boy, there's a lot of different parts and pieces that you could swap in, change, move around to really customize the deck to what you want it to do. So without further ado, onto the deck profile. Starting off with the Digitama, I'm going to be running one copy of Upamon. So Upamon is going to be the 5th Digitama of the deck. If you really feel like you want it to be something else, that's fine. I feel like for what the deck is trying to do, Upamon is one of the best Digitamas that we have because it's acting as a very easy and solid card draw engine for the deck. So it has a nice inheritable ability of when attacking once per turn. If the opponent has a Digimon with no Digivolution sources in it in play, then you get to draw one card. So literally for just attacking, most of the time you're going to end up drawing a card. Sometimes you're not going to be able to draw a card, but that's okay, considering this is just the 5th Digitama of the deck. And then as far as the main Digitama of the deck goes, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Tsunomon. So Tsunomon is a really solid Digitama for the deck because, well, Blue already has lots of ways to draw cards, and it's not going to be very hard for us to draw cards, so I figured we want to spend some time DP boosting our Digimon to ensure that they're going to be as strong as they possibly can, especially since we know Blue has a little bit of a hard time actually increasing its DP. So Tsunomon is one of the best DP boosters that we have, where he has this nice ability where during your turn, if this Digimon contains Garurumon or Omnimon in its name, then it gets plus 1000 DP. So, well, most of the cards in our deck are Garurumons, so it's just an easy way for them to get plus 1000 DP. Next, onto the rookies, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Gabumon. So this is the BT06 version of Gabumon, and this Gabumon is really good because he has 2 very solid abilities that we want to take advantage of. His first ability, which is a ability native to him, is an all turns ability where once per turn, when you play a Tamer with Matt Ishida in its name, then you get to gain 1 memory. So this just allows you to play your Tamers as efficiently as you possibly can, and, well, efficiency is always a good thing to have, so why not try to take advantage of it, especially since we do have a couple of different mats to try to make them even more efficient than they normally would. So it's just a solid card overall, just to try to make sure you could try to play your Tamers. And then he also has a nice inheritable ability, which is a when attacking ability once per turn. If this Digimon's name is Gabumon Bond of Friendship, then you get to unsuspend the card. So this just allows your Gabumon Bond of Friendship to basically get an extra attack, and sometimes you actually really need that extra attack on your Bond of Friendship to try to close out games or deal as much damage as you possibly can, all making this Gabumon just that good of a card to use. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Gabumon. So this is the Classic Collection version of Gabumon, and this Gabumon is another really good card to try to use for its inheritable ability. So its inheritable ability states that when attacking once per turn, you get to check the top 3 cards of your deck, and then you get to add 1 Tamer or 1 Digimon with Gabumon in its name among them into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom. So literally just for the act of attacking with our mid to high level Digimon, we're going to be trying to add cards to our hand to fish out either Gabumons, which are more rookies, or we're going to try to fish out our Tamers, so that way we could, well, play our Tamers as efficiently as we possibly can. So this is a really good Gabumon to complement the BT06 Gabumon and some other Gabumons based on what the deck is trying to do. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Gabumon. So this is the brand new promo version of Gabumon, and this Gabumon is going to be acting as the deck's dedicated Tamer Digger. So similar to the BT01 version of Agumon. This has the same type of ability where it's an on-play ability. You get to reveal the top 5 cards of your deck and add one Tamer among them and add it into your hand, and then the rest go to the bottom, and the Tamer isn't even specified on what color it has to be, making this card a really good card to be using because not only is it A Gabumon, but B, it's also helping to look for our Tamers. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Gabumon. So this is the starter deck version of Gabumon, the second starter deck coming from the Ulforce starter deck, to be more specific, and this card has some really good synergy with the deck because it has a nice inheritable ability where during all turns, if you have 8 or more cards in your hand, then this Digimon gets plus 1000 DP, so literally just having a relatively decently sized hand count means that your Digimon is going to be that much stronger to be using during both your turn and your opponent's turn, making it a little bit harder for them to interact with your Digimon. So this is just an absolutely fantastic way to try to DP boost our Digimon a little bit more. But speaking of trying to DP boost our Digimon a little bit more, next onto our champions, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Garurumon. So this is the BT05 version of Garurumon, and this card is absolutely insane for this deck to be running. So it has a nice inheritable ability where during all turns, while you have a Digimon with Garurumon or Omnimon in its name, then it gets plus 1000 DP. So this synergizes very nicely with the starter deck version of Gabumon, where during all turns you could potentially get plus 2000 DP, which was going to make it even harder for the opponent to interact with your Digimon. And on top of that, this card also could be tempo efficient because it has its own native ability, where when digivolving into this card, where if this Digimon is digivolving on top of a Digimon with Gabumon in its name, then you get to gain 1 memory. So this just allows you to be tempo efficient with this Garurumon, so that way you could technically evo him for 1 instead of 2, which is just a really good thing to try to climb your stages with as quickly as you possibly can, especially since we want our Gabumons to sometimes sit on the field, and depending on your Gabumon lineup, we just want to hard play a Gabumon sometimes to use its on-play ability, then digivolve it right away. So this is just an absolutely insane card for this deck to be using, not only just for the tempo efficiency, but for the DP boost as well. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Garurumon. So this Garurumon is coming from the Classic Collection, and this Garurumon is really good because it has its own powerful inheritable ability of when attacking once per turn, you get to play 1 Mat Ishida with a play cost of 3 or less from your hand for free. So the Classic Collection Gabumon is digging out your Tamers, so that way the Classic Collection Garurumon is allowing you to actually play your Tamers more efficiently than you normally would. And then for the actual act of playing your Tamer, then if you have the BT06 Gabumon just sitting on the field, then you get to gain a memory for doing that. So there is a little bit of combo play and synergy to allow you to try to play your cards as efficiently as you possibly can, making this Garurumon just that good of a card to be using. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Garurumon. So this is the first promo Garurumon, and this Garurumon is really good because, well, it's another card draw engine for the deck. So it has this nice, powerful inheritable ability where when attacking, not limited to once per turn, if this Digimon has Garurumon in its name, then we get to draw 1 card. So this is just a very easy and very powerful way for us to try to draw lots of cards relatively quickly because we have multiple different ways to, well, multi-attack in the deck, and that's just allowing us to easily fill up our hand to reach that 8 hand size and maintain that 8 hand size. So this is just a really good card to be playing, on top of the fact that compared to some of the other champions of the deck, it is just a little bit more efficient to hard play. In case you're stuck, you don't see a rookie, and you need to play other cards, the 4 play cost versus the 5 is a little bit helpful. And then the last champion of the deck is going to be 3 copies of Grizzlymon. So Grizzlymon is just going to be acting as the deck's dedicated blocker, and, well, it's one of the stronger blockers that we have for this type of slot. So I feel like because I actually want to use this card as a blocker, I want to make sure my blocker is as powerful as it possibly can be, and, well, Grizzlymon is currently fitting that bill. Next up, onto the ultimates, I'm going to be running 4 copies of WereGarurumon Sagittarius mode. So Sagittarius mode is an absolutely fantastic card for this deck to be running. I can't think of any other card that I would want to be using because of how good this card is. So the first big thing to note is it has 8000 DP, can evo off of a level 4 for 3 or a level 5 for 1, which it can come in handy to try to gain some extra evolutions to draw some extra cards with. And then on top of which, it has 2 very powerful abilities. Its inheritable ability, which is pretty decent, is an all turns ability, similar to some of the others that we saw before, where while this Digimon has Garurumon or Omnimon in its name, then it gets plus 1000 DP, making it just a little bit harder for the opponent to interact with. So if you combine this with the BT05 Garurumon and you combine this with the starter deck Gabumon, then you could potentially get a passive plus 3000 DP boost, which is going to make it a little bit harder for the opponent to interact with your Digimon, making it for a very powerful stack, on top of the fact that you could stack this on top of itself for some even more DP boosting potential for both your turn and the opponent's turn. And this card is also a really good card to digivolve on your other WereGarurumons because of its native ability, where during your turn, while this Digimon has a WereGarurumon in its name and its Digivolution source, then this Digimon gains jamming, so that way you could attack with this card and feel relatively safe swinging with this card, knowing that it's going to live through the security checks as long as it doesn't check an option. So this is just a very good card to be using for the deck overall, especially in combination with our other WereGarurumon. Which brings me to, well, the other ultimate of the deck, which is going to be 4 copies of WereGarurumon. So this is the promo version of WereGarurumon, and this is still just one of the best WereGarurumons we could think about utilizing, especially for this style of deck. So what this WereGarurumon is doing is it has a nice when attacking ability native to it, where once per turn, if this Digimon has a Garurumon in its Digivolution source, then you get to unsuspend this Digimon. So this is just very powerful because it allows us to actually multi-swing on our level 5s, and we have more ways to DP boost our Digimon to make this card relatively strong. So if we combine this with Tsunomon, we combine this with Gabumon, we combine this with BT05 Garurumon, then it's going to be swinging 9k twice at the opponent's security, which sounds pretty decent because it has a relatively high chance of succeeding through those multiple checks, allowing you to have different ways to aggress onto the opponent. Not to mention any Digivolutions that you could do to gain additional attacks, so it's just a very powerful card to synergize with a lot of our cards already, based on its native ability, but on top of that, it also has a nice inheritable ability that we definitely want to take advantage of and synergizes with the deck, because its inheritable ability states that during your turn, while you have 8 or more cards in your hand, then this Digimon gains security attack +1, allowing us to deal as much damage as we possibly can, especially paired up with any multi-attacks. So one of my favorite power plays that I like to do with this style of card is to swing with it, then unsuspend it. If it lives through the security check, then digivolve it and swing again with whatever Digimon we're using to digivolve on top of it. So that way we could try to optimize on how much damage we're trying to deal, and even though it is a little bit risky, depending on your stack, you could kind of gauge if you should do that or if you shouldn't do that, making it just a very flexible card for the deck to be using and adding lots of additional damage. Next, on to the Megas, I'm going to be running 3 copies of MetalGarurumon. So this is the Classic Collection version of MetalGarurumon, and this is a pretty solid card to be using for the deck. Well, one, because he's a MetalGarurumon and he has Garurumon in his name, so he works with all of our Garurumon synergies, and 2, he actually has a pretty decent ability attached to him. So he has a nice when digivolving ability where we get to gain 1 memory for every 4 cards in our hand. So the more cards we have in our hand, the more tempo efficient this card becomes, making him even easier to play than some of the Greymon counterparts. So it's just a solid way to try to get up into a strong Mega to aggress with and do various different things with. And then on top of that, he also has a nice when attacking ability, where if you have 8 or more cards in your hand and a Tamer in play, then you get to return one of the opponent's Digimon with an on-delete ability back to the bottom of their deck. So this is really powerful at dealing with pesky on-delete abilities, which there are a decent number of on-delete abilities running around in the game. So the fact that we do have a solid way to try to counteract some of those cards makes this card just really, really good. But the main reason why I really like this card is because the potential is there for this card to be super tempo efficient to try to get up into whatever level 7 you're going to be using or want to be using. And then the last level 6 of the deck is going to be 3 copies of MetalGarurumon. So this is actually the starter deck version of MetalGarurumon, and compared to a lot of the other MetalGarurumons, I think this card is still just generically good. because we have lots of ways to tempo and reduce our costs, we could make playing this card relatively easy just because of how much memory manipulation we could have in the deck or could utilize. So it can make this card relatively easy to use. And then on top of that, it has a very nice when attacking ability where once per turn you get to unsuspend this Digimon, and making it very easy to multi-attack with this card. So this is just a very solid card to think about aggressing with. So if you have a very powerful stack with all of your DP boosts and a WereGarurumon and Sagittarius, then this card could potentially be swinging for 14k 2 checks on each one of its attacks, on top of any other damage we dealt to the opponent before. So it's just a very solid card to be using with all of the types of cards that we're playing around with. And then the last mega of the deck and the only level 7 of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Gabumon Bond of Friendship. So even though this isn't an Omnimon, we are going to be running the Bond of Friendship package just because the Bond of Friendship package is just that good. So what this card is doing is it's a level 7 that evos for 3 and has 14,000 DP. Unfortunately, it won't retain most of the Garurumon based buffs, unlike Omnimon, so if you really wanted to use Omnimon, he's also a fine card to be using. But I feel like a Gabumon Bond of Friendship could just allow us to make even more powerful plays possible and act as some solid removal against the opponent's Digimon. So what this card is doing is it has a nice when attacking ability once per turn. If you have a Tamer in play, then you get to unsuspend this Digimon, fitting on theme with multi-attacking. So the fact that we could just multi-attack lots of different times on multiple different levels with a couple of different Digimon, we could be relatively aggressive with the deck, on top of the fact that we actually want to attack multiple times because of its when attacking ability, where we get to return one of the opponent's level 5 or lower Digimon to the bottom of their deck, and then trash all Digivolution sources on that Digimon. So this is just a very powerful ability to just try to pick apart the opponent's field if they have a wide field of, well, not level 6 Digimon, so that way we have more ways to try to deal with the opponent's Digimon. Next, onto the options, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Ice Wall. So Ice Wall is an absolutely insane card to be using for the deck because of how strong this option is. So generally I would want to run some options to try to manipulate our memory, but there just really wasn't a whole lot of deck space to do that because of our Tamers, and I'm rather delegating that task to our Tamers doing it. So what Ice Wall is doing is it has the main ability where all of the opponent's Digimon gain the ability of, when attacking, lose 2 memory until the end of their turn. So this basically just, well, walls them out from wanting to use their Digimon to attack, because otherwise they're going to be losing a lot of memory, and it really starts to limit what the opponent can and can't do on their turn while under the effects of Ice Wall. The also insane part of Ice Wall is the fact that this also does affect the raising area, so Digimon coming out of the raising area will also be under this ability because it is a static cloud effect that affects all of their Digimon as long as they're on the field. So this is just a very powerful option card to be using for that ability alone, and it's even a nice little security threat, acting like a Hammer Spark in security, where its security ability states that we get to gain 2 memory, so that way when it's checked in the security, it's at least trying to manipulate the opponent's memory, making their turns very hard and very awkward. And then the last option of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Kakaitis Breath. So this is just one of the best blue removal options that we have in the game. Most of the time you want to use it for its security ability because its security ability activates its main ability. So that way we could try to shut down some of the opponent's aggression, because its main ability allows us to bounce any one of our opponent's Digimon back to their hand. So we do need some form of defense in our security, and this is just one of the best defensive security cards we have. And then lastly, onto the Tamers, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Davis. So Davis is going to be acting as the dedicated memory fixing Tamer, so if our memory is ever less than 3, it'll hard set us to 3, which is really good because we're basing a lot of our plays off of 3 to 4 memory. And then on top of that, it has the on-play ability that's acting as some extra consistency for the deck, allowing us to check the top 3 cards and add a blue and a green Digimon among them into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom. So at worst, we're trying to dig out a blue Digimon, which the majority of our deck is blue Digimon, so he has a very high chance of succeeding, allowing us to, well, add more cards into our hand, so that way we could try to find our parts and pieces to, well, make our plays as powerfully as we possibly could. And then the last Tamer of the deck is going to be 3 copies of Mat Ishida. So this is the BT06 version of Mat, and this Mat is part of the Gabumon package. So what this card is doing is it has the very powerful ability where during your turn, when you have a Gabumon or Garurumon in its name moving out of your raising area, then you get to gain a memory and draw a card. So this just allows us to make some very powerful plays happen, especially if we have more mats on our field. Then this ability will trigger multiple times, so we could gain lots of memory and draw lots of additional cards. And then on top of that, the part that we're using for the Gabumon ability allows us to basically warp our Gabumon into a bond of friendship, going from a level 3 to a level 7 instantaneously at the cost of 2 cards off of the top of our security stack. But if we don't have any security left after this ability, then we get to keep the level 7 around, and that could be pretty devastating for the opponent to try to deal with a level 7 if we didn't Digivolve all the way up into it. Just having a surprise level 7 to deal lots of additional attacks could just be the game finisher. So I do think this card is really good in combination with all of the other cards we're playing with, just because we have easy ways of digging it out, we have easy ways of playing it now, and we have a really solid level 7 that we could use not only with this ability, but just classically Digivolved up into in a really solid stack. But as per usual, it's just a support package, and there is just lots of different ways you could build the deck and lots of different cards you could utilize depending on what you want to prioritize. So we do have a couple of really good Gabumons that you could consider utilizing. So you could consider utilizing the BT01 Gabumon just to draw a card generically, which is never a bad thing, on top of the fact that we have BT05 Gabumon to try to dig out our Garurumon and Omnimon pieces if we're playing more into the Omnimon package. I excluded him just because I'm not playing into Omnimon, so that's one less target for him to potentially grab. But even if you're not playing Omnimon, he's still just a good card to try to dig out your Garurumons with. And then we even have the first promo Gabumon, which allows us to try to trash the opponent's inheritables if we're leaning into that strategy, because a lot of the starter deck cards from the Cocytus Breath starter deck is about trashing the opponent's inheritable abilities, and we could build or tech the deck to incorporate more of that type of strategy. Then, as far as some other really good tech cards in our rookie slots, we could play Tsunomon to try to stop them from reducing their Digivolution costs, so that way we could try to control some of their actions and limit what they're doing, similar to how we want to consider using Madoki Betamon, so that way they can't gain memory, again, limiting and manipulating and controlling some of their actions if these cards aren't dealt with. Then we do have other cards that we could use in our champion slots. So we do have the BT01 Garurumon with the nice on-play ability of unsuspending one of our Digimon. It isn't necessarily hard to get up to 6 memory sometimes, depending on how you build your deck. So if you want to just hard play the card, then it does, but it also has some nice synergy with one of our other megas, which I'll get into in just a moment. But speaking of other Garurumon-based synergies, we could even consider using the Garurumon from the Cocytus Breath starter deck, just because this Garurumon, similar to the Gabumon and the promo Gabumon, just allows us to try to pick apart the opponent's inheritables and be rewarded for doing so. And then we even have Lobomon to consider as a really solid level 4 because, well, hybrids just win games. Then we have Monzimon and other tempo tools that we could consider utilizing if the goal is just to try to Digivolve efficiently all the way up into our main Garurumon. I think that's not necessarily as good of a strategy, but it's definitely there if you want to tap into it. And then we even have the Classic Collection Garurumon, which it synergizes with the deck by allowing us to draw some additional cards and gain some additional memory in various places. So this WereGarurumon lets us draw a card when we Digivolve up into him, and then he also gains us some memory when we're attacking if we have 8 or more cards in our hand. So this is just rewarding us for being at that 8 hand count, and that's, well, kind of what Garurumon wants to lean into. And then on top of that, as a reward for trying to get rid of the opponent's inheritables, we even have the starter deck WereGarurumon to think about to try to give us some extra security attack plus, but I don't necessarily think this is better than what the deck is already trying to do with the promo WereGarurumon, because this is a little bit more conditional on how we could deal extra damage. But speaking of some other synergies and other possible Garurumons that we could play on our Mega level, we do have MetalGarurumon from BT01 to try to reuse some of our Digimon from our inheritable sources. So he has the ability to split apart our inheritable sources when we're attacking, which allows us to use cards like the BT01 Garurumon to split apart, restand, and attack again. So it's just another MetalGarurumon that has a really solid ability that allows us to actually take advantage of our on-play abilities. Then we also have Garurumon to try to form a somewhat control-style deck. So it has the when Digivolving Digiburst ability to bounce one of the opponent's level 5 or lower Digimon back to the hand. So it at least has some form of removal. I don't think it's as strong as Victory, but something is better than nothing if you're trying to go into that direction, on top of the fact that it is a Garurumon by name still. And then we also have the BT05 MetalGarurumon to synergize with our level 7s and act as another really solid ability to try to get rid of those pesky on-delete ability Digimon. So it has the when Digivolving ability, where if it has a Garurumon in its inheritable sources, then we get to return one Digimon with on-delete in its effect back to the bottom of the opponent's deck. So it's basically very similar to the Classic Collection Garurumon. It's just when Digivolving instead of when attacking, and I think the when attacking recursive ability is just a little bit better. But this actually does have an inheritable ability for our level 7s to think about utilizing, of allowing us to gain a memory once per turn when we're attacking with it. So there are the pros and cons depending, again, on your type of build and what you're trying to do and what you're trying to gain out of the cards. Then as far as some alternate level 7s, we have, well, all of the different Omnimons that we have access to. So we have access to BT01 Omni, we have access to BT05 Omni, we have access to X Antibody. So there's just a couple of different Omnimons that we have access to that you could think about utilizing, and all of them are pretty good for their own individual uses. Then as far as some really solid options go, you could consider running Forbidden Trident as one of the best DP boosters that we could utilize, just because it also could potentially bounce some of the opponent's low-level Digimon back to the hand. So with all of our multi-attacks, this could be really good at bouncing multiple Digimon back. Then we do have a couple of memory boosts, so we could play in the form of Howling Memory Boost to try to double down and incentivize us to pick apart the opponent's inheritables to lock their Digimon out from literally doing anything, and then gain the 2 memory back later. But we also have a Blue Memory Boost if we just want to try to dig out some of our parts and pieces and still have that delay ability to gain 2 memory later. But if we just want to try to gain memory, then we could also just consider using Hammer Spark. And we have a slew of different removal cards that we also could be utilizing. So we have Rattlestar, we have Ray of Victory, we have Absolute Blast, we have V-Wing Blade. There's just a lot of different bounce removal effects that we have. And then we even could think about utilizing Kaiser Nails, because Kaiser Nail is, well, a pretty underutilized card right now. So I think this card still has lots of value being able to separate your stacks, so that way we could actually think about separating our level 6s off of our level 7, so that way we could reuse our level 6s depending on what your deck's build is. And this card could possibly synergize with some of our other cards, where we could try to take advantage of on-play abilities, or just try to get some extra Digimon bodies on the field to, well, be able to utilize them in various different ways. And then we do have a couple of other Matt Ishidas to try to make our BT06 Gabumon that much more efficient to use. So we do have the Matt Ishida from BT01 that's acting as a memory fixing Tamer. So if you didn't have access to Davis or don't want to use Davis, then Matt is also a really good card to use, and he could even help pick apart the opponent's inheritable sources, on top of the fact that we do have the starter deck Matt to think about, where it's a 2-cost Matt, so it could be played off of the Classic Collection Garurumon, on top of the fact that, well, it's another Mat that could help passively gain us memory for the opponent just literally having Digimon without inheritable sources in play. But if you wanted to try to pick apart the opponent's inheritables, then Sora and Joe is really good at doing essentially the same thing, where it's just gaining us some additional memory for the opponent having a Digimon without inheritable sources in play, and then it's allowing our blue Digimon to pick apart the opponent's inheritable sources by suspending this Tamer. But we even have some white Tamers we could even think about utilizing depending on your build, because Nokia is just an absolutely insane card to try to synergize with this style of deck, with her on-play ability allowing us to play a Gabumon or Agumon from our hand for free, so that's really, really powerful. No, you can't use this card in combination with Bond of Friendship. It's just asking for Gabumon, not Gabumon Bond of Friendship. So that's one thing to take in consideration, but we do have lots of Gabumons that still could work with this card, especially since a lot of them do have on-play abilities. And then on top of that, what we would try to use this card mainly for is for its main ability to reduce our evolution of our Garurumons and our Omnimons by 1 for each Nokia on the field. So this is just really good at just making our cards even more efficient to digivolve up into than they normally would be. And then if you are playing into the Omnimon-based strategy, then you could play Matt and Tai just because, well, it's interacting with Omnimon, giving him an extra security attack plus, and it's another decent way at trying to gain some additional memory for the opponent having a level 6 or higher Digimon in play. So we could hide something in our raising, have a Matt and Tai sitting on our field, raise up, digivolve into an Omnimon, and then start going ham. So there's just lots of different tamers that we could use based on the different types of builds that we're going for, depending on the different types of cards that we're utilizing. But for the most part, this is just my interpretation of a Garurumon tribal-based deck. Similar to the Greymon tribal-based deck, there's just lots of different possibilities, again, all depending on the types of megas and level 7s and options that you actually want to be utilizing. But I think this is just a very solid base for you to start thinking about, trying to incorporate the new Classic Collection cards with some of the current and existing cards that we have to try to deal as much damage as quickly as we possibly can while trying to play as efficiently as we possibly can. I understand that there's just lots of different tech and we don't have exactly enough room for everything, but I think this is going to be a very fun and interesting deck to be exploring, especially since we know that Greymons and Garurumons are two of the most supported name-based tribals that we currently have in the game. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.